Rain fell like the city was trying to wash a stain it couldn't name. In headquarters, the fluorescent lights kept humming as if nothing had happened. Agents still walked the halls with clipped steps, still avoided eye contact, still held files like shields. But something had shifted under the building's skin, quiet, invisible, and stubborn. Denji stood in the corridor outside the debrief room, hands hanging at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them anymore. His chest felt hollow where the cord lay, as if the chainsaw part of him had always been the loudest thing. And now the silence was asking what was left. Aki leaned against the opposite wall, sword strapped but not held, his eyes fixed on a point on the floor like it was safer than looking at Denji directly. Power hovered nearby, arms crossed, face twisted in a scowl that didn't know where to land. Makima had not moved from the doorway. She stood in the bright light with her umbrella open, rain beating on the black fabric despite being indoors. Because even the idea of weather seemed to obey her, her expression remained composed, the same soft calm she wore when the world was breaking. Only her eyes betrayed a faint tension, like a thread pulled taut and not yet snapped. Denji couldn't stop staring at the spot where the air had split, where Goku had stepped through a seam of light as if leaving a room. There was no scorch mark, no residue, just empty hallway, clean as any other. It felt wrong, like the universe had erased the evidence on purpose. Power's voice broke the quiet first, because she couldn't stand a room without noise. "So, he's gone," she said, as if naming it might bring him back. The orange man fled. Denji's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Aki's jaw tightened. "He didn't flee," Aki said, voice low. "He left." Power scoffed. "Same thing." Denji flinched. His eyes stayed on the empty space. "He saved people," Denji murmured, the words barely audible. "He saved me." Power blinked, surprised by the softness. Then her expression hardened, defensive. "He was irritating," she declared. "Always with the people, and the don't do that." "Power," Aki said quietly, warning. Power shut her mouth with a click, but her eyes stayed wide, restless. She looked at Denji like she didn't understand why his chest hurt when he still had lungs. Denji swallowed hard and finally let his gaze drift to Makima. She was still there, still calm, still watching. For a second, Denji expected her to speak, expected her to say his name in that gentle tone that made his body move before his brain could argue. Expected the leash to snap back into place, because that was how his life worked. Makima didn't say anything. Denji felt something terrifying in that silence. Not freedom. Not yet. Just the absence of the command he'd lived on. He forced himself to take a slow breath. The air scraped his lungs, thick with the sterile smell of the building. But it was his breath. No one else's. Makima's gaze met his. Her face didn't soften. If anything, it seemed more distant now, as if her attention had withdrawn to a deeper room behind her eyes. "You're still here," Denji heard himself say. Makima tilted her head slightly, acknowledging the statement like it was a report. "Yes." Denji's hands curled into fists. "You let him go." Makima's mouth curved faintly, an almost smile that could have meant anything. "I did." Denji's throat tightened. "Why?" A beat passed. Makima's eyes flicked, briefly, to the empty space where Goku had disappeared. When she spoke, her voice remained calm, but it landed differently now. Less like command, more like an admission she hadn't intended to make. "Because he would not belong to me," she said. Denji's chest stung. The old hunger rose in him, automatic and humiliating. Belong to me, belong to me. Let me be the one she wants." He hated that it was still there. He hated that even now, his body wanted to lean toward her like a starving animal. Denji swallowed, mouth dry. "And what about me?" he asked, voice rough. "Do I belong to you?" Makima's gaze returned fully to him, calm, measuring, like she could see all the things inside him that were still soft enough to press. "Yes," she said simply. Power made a small noise, half laugh, half snarl, like she'd expected the answer, but still didn't like hearing it. Aki's eyes narrowed. Denji's heart beat hard, and for a moment he felt the old instinct to surrender. It would be easy. It would be familiar. It would stop the pain of being a person who had to choose. He remembered the feeling of Goku's hand on his shoulder. Firm, warm, not asking for anything in return. He remembered the words that had come out of his own mouth like blood and sunlight. "I want to live for me." Denji took another breath. Then another. "No," Denji said. The word didn't shake this time. Makima's eyes sharpened a fraction. "Denji," she said softly, his name like a key. His muscles tensed automatically. Denji forced them to relax. He felt sweat on his palms. He felt the tremor in his knees. He felt the fear that came with defiance when your whole world had been built to punish it. He said it again. Louder. "No." A moment of stillness stretched. Makima didn't move. but the air in the corridor cooled subtly, like the building itself held its breath. Then Makima's gaze drifted away from Denji, past him, toward the hallway where agents moved like ghosts. Interesting, she murmured, almost to herself. Denji's stomach clenched at the word. It sounded like a scientist examining a new reaction. Aki pushed off the wall and stepped closer to Denji. Not quite at his side, but near enough that Denji could feel him there. A human presence. Solid. Power's hands flexed. Blood shimmered faintly under her skin. Ready? Makima's umbrella tilted slightly, and Denji realized, with a sick little twist, that she could still make them all kneel if she chose to. That no wasn't victory. It was a door cracked open in a room full of smoke. Makima's gaze returned to Denji. Her voice stayed mild. If you leave, she said, you will suffer. Denji's mouth twisted. I've been suffering, he said. At least this time it'll be mine. Power made a startled sound, as if she didn't expect Denji to speak like that. Aki's eyes softened by a fraction. Makima watched Denji for a long moment. Then she took one step closer. Close enough that Denji could see the fine detail of her lashes, the reflection of the lights in her pupils. You liked being mine, she said softly. Denji's breath caught. His cheeks heated with shame. Because it was true. He had liked it. He had lived on it. The thought made him want to tear his own skin off. He clenched his jaw and forced the truth into words. I liked not being alone, he said. But that wasn't love. That was hunger. Makima's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, an almost imperceptible ripple. Like a person hearing a language they'd never learned and recognizing it anyway. She looked away first. Go, Makima said quietly. Denji blinked. What? Makima's voice remained calm, but the word carried weight. Leave, she said. Before I decide you shouldn't. Denji stared at her, stunned by the permission. Even now it felt like a trick. Like the leash had simply been loosened to see if he'd run, and prove he deserved punishment. Aki's hand touched Denji's shoulder. Light, steady. Let's go, Aki said. Power sniffed loudly. Fine, but I am not helping you cry. Denji swallowed hard and turned. Each step down the corridor felt like walking through water. His body wanted to look back, wanted to hear Makima call his name, wanted the world to snap back into its old shape so he wouldn't have to do the terrifying work of living. He didn't look back, not until they reached the building's entrance. Outside, rain fell in steady sheets. The city smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust and new fear growing somewhere in the distance. Denji lifted his face to the rain, and let it hit his skin like proof. Aki stood beside him, silent. Power wrung water from her hair and complained loudly to the universe. Denji closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, a seam of light opened, blue sky on the other side. He imagined Goku stepping into warmth, into home, into a world where someone waited for him without needing him to earn it. The image hurt. It also helped. Denji opened his eyes and looked at the city. Okay, he whispered, to no one and to himself. Okay, I'll do it. Aki glanced at him. Do what? Denji swallowed. Live, he said. For me. And somewhere far away, beyond Tokyo's rain, beyond devils and contracts and control, Goku stood under a bright sky that smelled like grass, and cooking, and sunlight. He watched Goten sprint across a yard, laughing, and felt Chi-Chi's hand press against his back like an anchor. But even as warmth wrapped him, he turned his head slightly, as if listening for a sound he couldn't name. Not a voice, not a command. A faint pressure in the world's fabric, like a door that had once opened, and might open again. Goku exhaled slowly, letting the wind fill his lungs. He didn't regret leaving, but he didn't forget, because somewhere in another world, a kid with chainsaws for arms had said no for the first time, and stayed standing. And that, Goku thought, might be how you start saving a place that doesn't believe it can be saved.